I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion?
Any discussions?
Any additions?
Any additions?
Motion's already been made. The motion has already been made.
I second.
Second. So did you want to? So once they said we can't discuss anymore, Lisa?
You can discuss, but you've made a motion already to approve the agenda.
Okay.
If they're going to add things, then they would have to amend the motion. Otherwise, you're ready to vote.
Everybody ready to vote? All in favor? Motion passes. Joe, would you please lead us off?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and good afternoon, Commissioners. We've got 5 topics for the board's consideration this afternoon. The first is a continuation of the quarterly reports that we've been providing to you. This round of quarterly reports is the quarterly reports from this, the next quarter or the second quarter of our fiscal year. And we'll continue to provide the board with programming updates, project updates. But for this round of quarterly updates in particular, we're going to give the board a preview of the requested budgets that each department is requesting for the FY24 budget. You'll hear from 2 departments today, and kicking us off is the fire department. And with that, I'll recognize Fire Chief Perry.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This afternoon, I want to take just a few minutes and talk to you about the second quarter, as Joe just mentioned, and with a couple of snapshots looking at the calendar year 2022 as well. We won't spend a lot of time on that, but to hit it just at our last quarterly report, I gave you several statistics. So my intentions today is just give you some of those, some updates on what we talked about at the last one. When we look at call response for this quarter, there were 555 emergency incidents, which is 5% more than I reported to you last quarter. And graphically, you see that on the right as we continue we're at a pretty high trend as we continue with our call volume going up each quarter. When we look at that in the annual perspective, looking at calendar year 2022, there were 2,118 incidents, which is 2% more than 2021. You may recall, and you can see on the graphic there, 2021 was a significant jump over 2020. We wondered when that happened, was that just something with that year? Was it, is it truly a sign? And what we're seeing is, yes, that our call volume, that 2021 was not an isolated incident. Our call volume continues to increase as we saw in 2021. A question that I get from time to time is, how does 2,118 calls, how does it compare? It's a number and it's hard to use it, have a reference point. So what I did was I collected a couple of either neighboring jurisdictions, many of which are similar in size to us. Hopkins, just because they're one of our neighbors. Nashville, Roseville, and Selma are similar in call volume. Similar in size. Some maybe a little larger, maybe a little smaller. But they're similar. They are all one station fire departments, as are we. Some of those are working towards multiple station operations, but Nashville, Roseville, and Selma, there's a lot of similarities. But you can see the call volume of those 3 areas as compared to ours as a point of reference. And in Wendell, again, a little higher than us in population. Our 3-station operation runs just a little higher as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context when we talk about call volume, is how it shows out. We also talked about it, our other one, our call response time. We use call response time to measure lots of things, but ultimately getting there in time to make a difference, whether it be a medical emergency or a fire situation. So to kind of follow up on those, our call processing time, which is outside of our control, but yet something we continue to track. How long does it take people when they're on the 911 call? 76% of the calls met that goal. Last quarter, it was 74%. After the call is handled at the 911 center and the call is dispatched, we have to get the trucks en route, get our personnel mobilized and moving, and that's our turnout time. Our goal is that we'll be en route in 90 seconds. 90% of the time. We were at 91% last quarter. We were at 89. A lot of that just depends on what's going on when the call occurs, but we're right around that goal that we have established of 90%. Once our trucks are on the road, it's travel time. How long does it take us to actually get there? This is very indicative of our stations located in close enough proximity to the people we serve. We have a 4-minute goal inside of town. Last quarter, we were at 70%. This quarter, we were at 67%. And that's typically related to more calls in those fringe areas. So you put all that together, and our total response time goal, which is a total, when you look at adding all three of those up, is 7.5 minutes. We met that goal 80% of the time, which is slightly less than our 81% last time. So last time we talked about response to trends. What are we doing as those trends occur? What are we doing in reaction to that? Simultaneous calls was a big part of that. We hired 5 additional personnel that moved our shifts from 4 per shift to 6 per shift, which enabled us to put 2 crews in service, which doubles our effectiveness when simultaneous calls occur. So what I intend to relay here is it working? We've put those people in place, and what were our intended results happening? When we look at it, there was about 100 simultaneous calls per quarter when you look over the last 2-year period. But when you look at since November the 14th is when both of those trucks went in service together. Out of those, basically about 100 calls, only 9 of those resulted in a delayed response, so my answer to you is it is absolutely working. Our crews, having them split over 2 units, is really having a positive impact on our response time. We did look into those 9 delays, and most all of them are where we had multiple calls, 3 calls at the time, or all of our crews were already tied up and had another call. So lots of call types, one of which was a working structure fire where our crew was tied up on a call and someone's house was on fire. Our second crew responded and was able to initiate fire attack very quickly. So if I could tell you any good news tonight, that would be the good news that is very much working. This relays right into our budgetary impact for fiscal year 24. You may recall we had outlined how we would add staff over the next few years to meet the increasing demand. And through our budget work last year, Wake County came to us and had identified the same thing, that there was additional staffing needed. And we went through a program where they paid 100% of 3 of our new employees for fiscal year 23. So in fiscal year 24, that 100% funding will end, and we'll be responsible for our share. So it's one of those things, it's a new thing for FY24, but it's an existing thing, if that makes sense. The personnel are already here. We just now begin to bear for fiscal year 24 the full cost of those 3 positions.
So it's not a cost share? We're going to be taking on the full cost?
We assume our cost share, yes.
Okay, and the cost share is?
Wake County pays for the coming year 36%, basically, and some decimal, but great question. We're not going to assume the full 100%. We'll assume our 63% or what have you. To kind of summarize, that is those cost share of those 3 firefighter positions is the majority, the vast majority of the increases within the fire department budget for FY24. There are some miscellaneous costs associated with the increased call volume, such as increased fuel costs and those kind of things. But primarily, the cost share is the big driver. You will also see in this year's budget submittal a hose and nozzle project. I call that project out because it's a little bit special as we look at something. This was a project that was initiated by our staff as they came to us and said that they felt there was a need for us to replace some of our hose and nozzle. I agree at face value. We are using hose and nozzle, some of which is in excess of 30 years old. But we've got the situation where a lot of different equipment that we've replaced over the 30 years. But the reason I point that out is because we've pushed that back to our employee group to vet that justification, vet why we need that, and develop the whole project as far as what we should do. I included just a few pictures of our staff going out there and testing the various types of hose. They're testing it for the impacts that kinking and the impacts of sharp turns. How does that affect nozzle reaction and that kind of thing? And any of y'all you can imagine, it's become a little bit of a battle between new technology and old school. Because fire hose and nozzles is not different than any other technology. We have to weigh that out and figure out the best of both worlds, at least in my mind. If we proceed with that project, it will be cost shared as well with the county, just like our operational costs. Give you a few project updates. I've got just a few that we've talked about before, but I want to give you some updates on them. Our fire EMS station continues to trudge along. We did have our first public engagement session with a fairly steady group of people coming and asking questions. The majority of the questions that we got were related to impact of traffic on our facility, impact specifically of the new development on the end of Judge Street. You know, if that brings a lot of traffic, how would that impact this facility? And that was the vast majority of the questions. We had a lot of people that wanted to just ask general questions about what would we do, how would we do this, but a lot of really good positive feedback. We've continued to update our project website. We included a video from that first public engagement session. For those who are unable to attend, they can watch the video and kind of get a snapshot of those in attendance. One of the local, Wake Weekly did an article and published that on what was going on as well. So we continue to push it out on social media. So we seem to be we are really happy with the public engagement that we've had. Our next public engagement session is on March the 2nd, which is next Thursday night. We'll have the same players there. So if someone missed the first one, they can come and get the exact same information that we talked about. Just be available to answer questions. But at the same time, we'll also kind of carry our participants to the next step, and we'll begin to talk about what does the facility look like. So to that, I've got you, to give you a heads up. I've got you a booklet here. This includes the elevations and the floor plan. Please know these are preliminary, they're conceptual, that look through them. The people who come to the public engagement session will be able to see these as well. But I give these to you. If you look through these and you've got questions or anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll be glad to kind of walk you through it. You may even see little things that I'll give you a really low-hanging fruit for me. The way the building is lettered. Well, that was the architect just putting something there. We really haven't gone into great discussion about how we would letter the building. So fine items such as that would have to be worked out as well. Yes, sir.
Because of the limited space we have here, was there any consideration given to 2 stories?
There
Conserve some
was. We did talk about that with the architect. They shied away from it due to the increased cost and was concerned what it may do to the project cost. But beyond that, that may be a really good question that we reach out to him and dig into a little bit deeper. Because that would narrow the footprint down. Yes, ma'am.
And on this, along the same vein with footprints, I believe you and I had a little bit of a conversation before about the massive amount of single-use asphalt that is coming into play that will only be used for fire station-related activities and will not be available for any other purpose, just because the fire engines will be loading on the side instead of fronting to Judd Street. Has there been any discussion with the architect as far as doing some kind of mock-up where we can cut down on that single-use concrete and maybe even have the bays facing Judd?
Right. We did have conversations with him about that, and I think he's certainly open to talking about it more. The design and the view that you see on the screen here is the view from Town Hall,
right,
just as a reference point. So they intentionally put the truck bays facing Town Hall to give it more of a residential appeal from Judge Street. And that is, like you and I talked about, when you do that, you've got driveways that go to the back and driveways that come back from the back, as compared if the bays were actually located right on the front, at the street level. You could presumably eliminate some of that if you exited the bays and went right onto the street. But he said his answer was that he had put a preference on that Judge Street residential curb appeal.
Okay.
But if there was a desire to make that more of a preference, he could certainly look at doing that.
I certainly would love for the community to be able to use some of that space that is slated just for the single-use asphalt in other ways, if it's going to be paved at some point, that the community or the residents, it can have multiple uses. I don't know that it is a bad thing to know that there is a fire station there.
Right.
And that making it look more residential, I myself, like, I'm struggling with the appeal of doing it that way to the detriment of all that, green space.
Certainly. I've got, if I can show, there we go. Technology is not my, so please bear with me. This is the mouse is coming and going. There it is. Whoa. Make this bigger. This is a 3D model that we'll be using next Thursday night. So this gives you, to me, this is a little easier to understand, a little easier to feel than what you see on the paper. So I'll take, this is only a minute long, but I will let you see.
Might be out of range.
I may be getting the best out of it. Oh, yeah. We just click play there. We'll have that available. It'll probably be running on like more of a continuous loop. But hopefully that gives you a little bit better feel of what the facility could look like should we continue down the road that we're on. I will tell you that we're getting near the end of our current memorandum of understanding with Wake County. If you recall, you adopted a memorandum of understanding and it outlined a list of tasks. We've completed our public engagement will be one of the last items on that. So we'll be coming to you in meetings fairly soon to talk about what the next step with Wake County would be as we continue to move through the process. Any questions before I move, any further conversation before I move to the next project update? Couple others. Not a lot more, but sleeping quarters renovation is in progress. We moved out of the affected area. Our contractor started on February 6th. This resulted in us moving more staff to the old EMS building. We have 3 of our shift staff as well as myself and the fire marshal working out of the EMS building. The others are in every little creek and crevice we can find in the existing building while the work is going on. That work is scheduled to be completed by early June. So everybody's looking forward to getting that done and getting back into the building. The emergency operations plan, you may recall, we had that in our project list for this year to update that. And the emergency operations plan gives us guidance. It gives us determining how to handle events, whether they be hurricanes or tornadoes or severe weather events or items such as that. And the whole idea behind the emergency operations plan is figure it out before it happens. Figure out what we will do, how we will handle those, and at the same time, doing it in a manner that continues to make us receptive should there be federal grants, FEMA grants associated with those. We want, especially in times where the disaster is declared, that we're doing it in accordance with federal guidance. So IEM, our contractor, completed an analysis to determine where do we need to fill the gaps in. We are currently working with them to review those drafts by section, and that plan is scheduled to be completed by the end of June and would come back before this board for approval when that is done. And my favorite part of the quarterly reports, staff updates. Some of this you've seen through some of our social media posts or what have you. Senior firefighter Lee Shanley was promoted to senior firefighter during this quarter. He also completed his fire educator certification. That is one of his, was one of his, and continues to be one of his career ladder requirements as he moves through our organization. With his promotion, he was assigned to Engine 91. Lieutenant Justin Lee completed his state certification as an instructor. Again, a career ladder to be able to give him, to enable him to begin teaching classes within our department. And then firefighter Peyton Richardson completed his driver operator aerial certifications as well as the fire educator certification. That puts firefighter Richardson eligible for promotion as well. So I'll give you a spoiler. You may see some promotions for next quarter as well, because these gentlemen work very, very hard to improve themselves, which in turn improves our organization. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, guys?
I'm sorry. He?
Any questions, Commissioner Louts? Commissioner Baxter? Mr. Clark?
No.
Thank you. Thank you once again. Thank you. Yes, sir. Move on.
Thank you. The second quarterly report for this quarter is from our Public Works Department, and with that, I'll recognize Mary Duffy.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right, I'm back to talk about what's going on at Public Works. So, quick update on the West Horton Drainage Project. We've requested letters of interest for the engineering on this work. They're due March 2nd at 5 p.m. So we hope to be back in May to ask for award of the contract. This will be a large one with a large team. We're asking them to do everything, so it's going to take a large team to get it done. We did submit a Lassie grant application and learned that we were not funded. 83 applications were submitted. The top 20 were funded. We ranked number 32. So we were competitive, but not competitive enough. Our consultant on that has requested a debrief with DEQ. Initially, we disagree with some of the scoring, but right now we're just hoping to learn how we can do this better next time. As mentioned last time, we did receive a notice of deficiency, which is like being scored a needs improvement when you were in school. It's not failing, but there are definitely areas where we can do better in our stormwater program. The big takeaway, as we mentioned before, was that staff are doing the best they can with the resources allocated, but that more allocations into the stormwater program will be necessary to pass the next audit, which will be in 2027. It's a 5-year cycle, and you're audited at the end of every permit cycle. So the couple of reminders, the permit is an unfunded federal mandate stemming from the Clean Water Act. The program is huge and covers a range of diverse activities. The state audited 3 of the 6 best management practices, or BMPs, and they instructed staff to audit the remaining 3 BMPs. So that self-audit and the required stormwater program updates are underway right now. They're wrapping up. And that updated stormwater management program will inform the investments and actions that are needed to carry us through that next audit in 5 years. So you'll see some of those investments in the fiscal year 24 budget requests. Green Pace and Arundel, one of those intersections. We are working to install signals and turn lanes here. We've requested bids for the construction of this project. They are also due March 2nd. We've had a lot of interest in this project, including 8 firms that attended the pre-bid meeting. The estimated cost of $1.4 million should be covered by the transportation impact fees, and that does include things like construction administration, construction engineering inspection, and contingency. So that should all be covered well within the TIF fees we've got, TIF funds, and we're hoping for substantial completion by the end of the year.
Does this project, this wasn't one of the ones that we were pursuing through Campo, correct?
This is not.
Okay,
This one is town funded.
okay.
Shepherd School, Old Bun, and Proctor intersection improvements. Similar thing, adding turn lanes and signals to a very busy intersection. We are currently working on right-of-way acquisition for this project. The construction funding for this one would be a blend of sources, including the transportation impact fees, but also fees in lieu that have been paid by Autumn Lakes and will become due from the Barrington development. Once we get through property acquisition, we'll finalize the design and permitting, we'll work on utility relocation, and we'll go through the contracting process for construction.
With the utility relocation, is that going to, are they burying lines, or are they just going to move the utilities as is?
It's moving an electrical line that's already there. It's got to be moved because the right-of-way, the roadway itself is widening. But also, I believe there is also some stormwater and water and sewer impacts as well, and we're working through those with City of Raleigh and internally with the designers.
Are we going to bury the electric lines?
I believe they're moving poles. I believe they're staying above ground. So this and the next slide are concept maps that we requested and had our designers, the same engineering firm is working on 2 intersection projects together, and we asked them to combine the concept maps and include a couple of development improvements in the area so that we could create a public education tool for how these complex roadway and transportation projects and development combine to improve an entire corridor. So what you see here is the north end of that. It's kind of disorienting, but north is to your left, south is to your right. And so this is pretty much the Green Pace and Arundel project that I mentioned, tying into the developers' roadways improvements for Popeyes and Highway 55 Burgers right there at Bojangles. And then to the right is the beginning of that Campo-funded project for North Arundel, which this is the more detail for that on the next page here. And so what we've done here is we've reinvested in the design of this project to deal with some things that have happened as the situation changes over time. The development there at Popeyes and Highway 55, for example, by extending the northbound right-hand lane so that instead of having to turn at Pierce's, it will now go up and tie into those developments, and you would be able to stay 2 lanes northbound all the way up to where Highway 55 and Popeyes have their shared entrance and tie into their improvements. We've also done some things like rework a little bit of the sidewalk, curb, and gutter work in front of the parish properties right there at Hendricks and Pierce's. And then we've also gone after some additional things, renewed some permitting and redid the its subsurface utility excavation, basically finding out what's been put in the ground in the area since the last time that was done, because it's been a few years. So those things are underway now, but this is a good tool for us on helping everyone understand how all this stuff ties together to improve safety, access, and traffic flow through a very busy corridor. one of my favorites. We are very excited to be underway with the Public Works Equipment Shed. I want to thank you again for funding this project because it is going to be a huge help to our operations and our team. We anticipate the building permit coming through any day. The submittals from Jackson Builders are under review, and I don't have an ETA on when this will be finished because it's largely dependent on these lead times, but right now we're working on the schedules and reviewing all those submittals, and so we'll know more about the exact timing at the pre-construction meetings that are coming up. I want to start forecasting a little bit of the budget stuff, and I'm going to start with a review of the statistics. These are over the past 10 years, so this is showing the growth since roughly 2012. I'm not going to read them to you, but go over a couple of the things that are going on. So we're clearly growing leaps and bounds, and I want to talk about what some of this drives. Like the growth in streets, yeah, we've grown 79%, but that drives a lot of work in our department. That drives, I think we mentioned before, the 4 S's of streets, which is signs, sidewalk, sweeping, and street maintenance. So the sweeping time goes up immediately because we sweep residential neighborhoods every month. Signs, they go missing, they get damaged. Unfortunately, people hit them with vehicles. Teenagers think it's fun to take one and hang it on their walls. So there's maintenance work that has to be done there. Right-of-way trimming increases. That's a combination of preserving sight lines and preserving your investments in large town vehicles like fire trucks and knuckle booms. So we have to trim things back from the right-of-way. Sidewalks and roadways require more maintenance and repairs over time. Stormwater maintenance is another one. I mentioned this program is huge. Every time we grow in stormwater pipe, our requirement under our permit for line cleanings and inspections and inspecting structures called catch basins, boxes, they all increase as well. We have a big job in stormwater that the engineer is going to take over, and so we're anticipating a transition time between Public Works and the new engineer when they come on board, because it's just going to be too much for anyone to take on at once. And so one of the things that we're requesting in the budget, and I'll talk about in a minute, is a stormwater technician, an environmental technician to assist that engineer. And more residences mean more calls to the Public Works office, more houses to stop at on our various routes for picking up yard waste and bulky waste, leaves and such, more new trash cart deliveries to make. It all adds up, but we have not added any operators in this time period to handle any of the additional work. So you will see that request as well. These are our personnel requests for fiscal year 24. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give me a high-level scope of what the environmental technician is going to be covering, duty-wise?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're not able to do right now is water monitoring, and that is one of the things that they anticipate we will need to do to pass our next audit successfully. But there are things that are at a much more day-to-day level. Public education is a huge piece of the permit, and it is currently being done by Public Works admin staff as they have time. IDD&E, which is illicit discharge detection and elimination, is one of the program areas where we don't currently have this capacity to do much with it. And so what that involves is that monitoring, water monitoring is part of it. When you detect things in the water, you need to find out where they're coming from. And when people report they're seeing something in a stream, they're seeing bubbles, just going out and looking at our outfalls and seeing what you see there is part of the IDDE program. Then you trace anything you find back to a source, and you work with that source to eliminate the pollution that's going into the waters. That's one of 6 areas where we need more staff to have the capacity to meet the program requirements.
And so the environmental technician is mostly going to be focusing on the stormwater aspect of what we've got going on then?
Yes, this person is intended to help with monitoring, reporting, public outreach, public education, And the difference there is I can tell you something and that's educating you. I ask you to come volunteer with me to mark stormwater catch basins, for example, and that is outreach. Talking to restaurants. Restaurants are a huge source of pollution, especially in small towns. So going to a restaurant and educating them on how they can keep pollution from their dumpster from going into the stormwater system. Educating, most people don't realize the stormwater system is not filtered. There is no processing plant. It doesn't go somewhere to get treated. It goes directly from the road to the river. So just getting that message out there and helping people understand that when you pour a gallon of oil in the stormwater drain, it's not going to a treatment plant, it's going into Little River. That changes people's perspective on things. A lot of people don't realize if you over-fertilize your lawn, you have polluted the stormwater system because at some point that nitrogen is running off into the river. Right. So there's a lot of components to it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of education that they're going to be taking care of.
It's a lot of different activities.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Excuse me. So the 3-person crew is obviously, from the statistics I just gave, going to make a big difference on our team. The customer service technician is a request to continue a pilot program that started in January. And even already, it's a huge benefit to our team in terms of efficiency. But we're already getting phone calls complimenting this person, saying what a great job Wayne did and how nice he was when he answered a question or dropped off some of the materials. So we would like to continue that program because it keeps us from having to send a 3-man crew to deliver trash carts on their way to a job site, for example. The additional summer mowing help is we currently have 1 part-time position. We would like to add a 2nd one. Summertime is peak landscaping season. It is also the time that most people take a vacation. It is also the time that you see a lot of people transition out of school and into the workforce. And this is a huge hiring and personnel driver for us. It is key. We have 6 people on our team right now who started out as summer mowing help and are now full-time operators and crew leaders. And this is our best opportunity to evaluate someone, to train them and evaluate how they work on the job and on the team. So we'd like to add to that and help us be able to do more over the summer with our other responsibilities. We're also asking for a part-time receptionist. Our call volume right now is up to an average of about 30+ calls a day. And that's not including people who come to the door, vendors who come to the door, and deliveries and things like this. It is pulling a lot of time away from administrative staff, including the director, and so this part-time receptionist would help us regain a lot of efficiency on the admin side of our team. We're asking for a property maintenance technician. Right now, property maintenance is performed by our construction inspection team. These are the same people who are out inspecting infrastructure in the neighborhoods. That growth is pulling them more and more out into the field and away from the town buildings. So what we'd like to do is bring someone in now to start supporting that team on the property maintenance side of things, learn from them. Our construction inspection team are 2 very experienced Town of Zebulon employees who know these buildings inside out. They may eventually be transferred under engineering, and it's important that we start transferring that knowledge from them now. Jason Brown, for example, he's been with the town 25 years. He's not going to be here in 25 more years, and we've got to get the knowledge that he has transferred to other staff before he gets to an age and a point in his career where he's retiring. So this is a first step to separating construction inspection from property maintenance and transferring that knowledge to be retained within the department. Already spoke to the environmental technician. And then the plan reviewer and encroachment coordinator is a person who would focus on infrastructure review, who would coordinate with NCDOT and other agencies when we need an encroachment to install irrigation in the right-of-way, for example. And this person would take demands off of the new engineer and the Public Works Director and be able to handle some of these things so that those folks can focus on their core duties, and because they are just overloaded. The new engineer will be, the director is now, and being able to separate this piece out and provide that support to the developers who are calling and emailing, and one even came by today, and be able to give them more support and free up these high-level staff. That is the goal of that position.
As far as the encroachment goes, are they going to be liaising with our legal team to get those encroachments figured out, or is this something different?
It's both. As needed, they may be coordinating with Eric and the other legal attorneys where we need to hammer out a contract. Some of these are very standard, like we have a renewed agreement with DOT every year, and then some of them are very specialized and one-off, but it would be on an as-needed basis. And then, like any other position, these drive a host of other costs that you would see in the fiscal year 24 budget. So when you hire a police officer or firefighter, they need to be outfitted with uniforms and gear. The same thing is true for public works employees. So depending on which role we're talking about, the supplies that are needed or the equipment that's needed may change, but you would see other costs in the budget corresponding to these positions.
When you create the budget, could you make sure that it's clear that with each position, the associated costs just to onboard them in a manner that we'll be able to identify that the environmental technician also needs this amount of equipment?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
Absolutely. All right. So one of our non-personnel budget requests is the laydown yard expansion at the Public Works office. The footprint for the Public Works site hasn't changed in over 30 years, but growth drives a need for more equipment, more supplies, more materials. We've acquired various pieces of equipment already, and while the new shed will be a huge asset for us, it also occupies 2,500 square feet of our current laydown yard. So the goal here is to expand to the east, provide a place where we can store equipment, materials, and supplies beyond what we currently have. We would also rework the stormwater pond that's over in that area and eventually look to expand the salt and brine facilities at the site. We're working with a consultant right now on a master plan, and so we'll have a better picture of all of this and the costs during the spring budget meetings.
Is that master plan just going to be for the laydown yard, or is that going to just encompass? Is the master plan going to just be the property where the Public Works yard, the laydown yard is? Is that what that's for, or is it going to, are there going to be additional components in that master plan?
I am not sure right now. Please answer that.
A very good question, and we are including in there the future looking at maybe a maintenance shop. So we're going to put some footprints down to make sure the area works for like a maintenance shop as Public Works takes on more and more vehicle maintenance. Like Mary said, the salt brine facility needs to be upgraded, so we're going to need a bigger footprint for that. So you're going to see blocks of area carved out. The goal is to look at this area before we expand into it to make sure it can handle all the Public Works functions and stuff. So there's multiple pieces like that we got included in the conceptual.
And so it's all just going to be on that one footprint that's right there? Okay.
Yes, sir, yeah. Yes, ma'am, we have 7 acres. If you're looking at our facility and to the left of it, we go all the way down to the railroad track. And so we're going to go up to that first spur that cuts between the track, and we feel like that will help us in the near future handle our expanded operations.
Thank you.
All right. And then the other thing we're looking to put into the 2024 budget is a rehab of our existing shop. The shop is over 30 years old and it's overdue for renovation. This project is an investment in the existing asset's useful life. The facility is actually in really good shape, especially structurally, but it's missing some functional pieces and it needs some repairs. So by making these repairs and changes now, the town could get another 30 years out of this building. You can see the insulation cover cracks in this picture here. The place leaks a little bit in the rain, and it is a hot tin can in the summer. So we're looking to do things like fix the insulation on the covers on the walls, replace the roof coating, which is coming due in the next year anyway, add a grease and oil separator and ventilation systems because we're doing so much more vehicle maintenance now than we were before. So we need to add these things so that it is a safer environment in which to do that, both for the fleet mechanic who's performing that work, but also from an environmental perspective on what is being used in that shop and there being more oil hitting the drain. So we need to get those things in place. And like I said, it turns into a hot tin can in the summer, so we want to add some large fans to move the air and bring that down. We're not looking to air condition the shop or anything that extensive, but we do need to move the air in the summertime because it does become unbearable in July and August. So if there's anything else you'd like for us to look into adding into the budget requests, please let Chris know. And we hope you're enjoying seeing the views of Town Hall on WRAL on the weather forecasts and enjoying the new trees and sod out on the lawn now. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I have a question about an FY23 project that maybe you can just give me a quick update on. I know that we have done some discussing about the Sycamore sidewalk project as well as redoing the sidewalk on Gannon. So has there been any movement? Because I haven't seen any construction taking place, but I also know that a lot of stuff has to go on in the background before that can happen. So are there dates before that project's going to move forward?
Yes, you're correct. There is stuff happening in the background. I know one of the things that we have done recently is surveying, marking, and looking at trees that may be in the way of the project. Chris would be able to give a better update. I'm sorry, but this isn't one that I've been as tapped into, but I have seen activity happening in the background, contact with property owners and things like that.
Yes, ma'am. We are in the process of requesting for an NCDOT encroachment agreement. The plans are basically 95% complete, pending on their comments. The reason we have to ask for an NCDOT encroachment agreement is to work in front on West Gannon Avenue, being a DOT street, so we have to get permits from them. We've also began the process of surveying there at the drugstores about potentially drawing maps and getting a survey and approaching the property owner about securing an easement there. We are in the final processes of starting to set dates for bidding and those things. So our goal is to bid this project in April. So I apologize. We don't have a few more definite dates, but we are working hard to move that thing forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Me, the ARPA funds that we're bidding out, would that all go to one person, one company?
For the West Drainage Horton,
Correct.
or West Horton Drainage Project?
Correct.
It would likely be going to a team. So this project, we've got the ARPA funds, but it is going to need design, construction administration, construction engineering inspection, actual construction. There's a host of different roles to be performed here. It's unlikely that one firm would be able to do everything. So it will probably go to multiple firms.
Is there a max we can kind of like bid out to one firm?
A lot of times what will happen is you end up with a team with a prime and subs. So the prime is the one who officially is awarded the contract but their team is awarded the contract, and typically there's language that says basically that they can't substitute out other members of the team without working with us. They can't just say, oh, Bob's out, Mike's in. It doesn't work that way. But we would award one contract for whatever is covered under that, whether that's design or construction, and then whoever's on that team, the work gets split up depending on how they are set up and who's on that team and who serves which roles.
Are there key factors that we look at when we do that? You know, like when you guys are doing that, what are some of the key factors that we look at?
Absolutely. So an RFLOI is a qualitative or quals-based selection process. And this is something in the law called the Minnie Brooks Act in purchasing, where you cannot ask professional services firms for pricing when you are considering who to hire. You ask for their qualifications and you lay out basically what you're looking for. You have to score it in a very standard way. And then once you select the most qualified firm or team, then you negotiate price. So we have things that we're looking for in the team. We've laid out in the RFLOI what kind of tasks they need to involve, which DOT pre-qualified codes they have to meet. And we've put together a team to review the proposals that we receive. We will then shortlist and interview the top 3. We have a scoring matrix we'll use to determine who gets that work, and then we negotiate with them on price. If we can come to an agreement on something that's within our budget, we move forward. If we can't, we go to the next best team and negotiate with them.
So they don't basically come in knowing we got 1.885 to give out, so they're kind of like, they're in the dark with that a little bit, and then kind of later on we'll discuss it, or
It's
that's
public
known knowledge?
information. It's public information.
Okay,
So they know that, but at the same time, you can tell to some extent when there's fluff. You know what a reasonable rate for the work to be done is. So, and again, they have to negotiate with us. If we don't come to a reasonable understanding of what it's worth, then we would move to the next firm.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, let me add something to Mary's comments. Of these funds, there's going to be 2 primary contractors. First is going to be a design team, and then there's going to be a construction team. What Mary's referring to, the RFLOI, will be a team of engineering designers. It could be geotech, it could be surveyors, it could be a real estate firm to help with land acquisition. It could be firms that is specialized in we built this project around NCDOT specifications to make sure we get reimbursed. So it could be a firm that is heavily involved in construction inspection. So when we say a team, we bring a team in here, we'll call it Chris's team. He's going to have several consultants behind him working on that team to bring you forward with the design that we will ultimately bid out and put on the street for contractors to bid this work. So you basically have two primaries, a primary designer and a primary contractor, each of which could have subs underneath them.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Any further questions? Harrison? Commissioner Lotz? Commissioner Baxter? Commissioner Clark? All right, thank you. Good? Need a break? You good? You need a break? Before we move to the next section, we'll take a quick 10-minute break.
red, yellow, blue, big Legos. You know, the bridge. Right. You got the
Dr.
Sunday
Pepper.
Bridge.
Now,
and
Coke,
you got
Dr.
underneath
Pepper
there,
Zero?
the bridge. I'll
Same
send you
thing?
a picture that they painted.
I mean, but that's why I can drink one of these. I can't drink a Diet Coke. So don't give me one of those. Are you going to go to City Vision? Okay. Is everybody in this room going to City Vision?
Joe's already got the name tag.
That's what I needed to know.
Yes.
Because we can register now.
Oh,
so-
did it just open today, didn't it? Because I checked yesterday.
It opened yesterday.
I looked yesterday, yesterday
Opened
afternoon.
late,
It says save the date, but I don't
Where's it
know.
at now? This Wilmington
It's in
again?
Concord this year.
25th to the 27th.
7, yeah.
Okay.
Good times. We were talking about that last night. And can we register early so we can all be at the same hotel?
I'm going to try to do it tomorrow.
Any other order? Joe?
Mayor Pro Tem, the town of Zebulon stands in a position to become a North Carolina Main Street community this coming fiscal year. In order to do that, there are going to be some bases and milestones that they accomplish between now and July. And so I've got with us our Downtown Associate Community Director, Teresa Piner, to give you a preview of those opportunities that will come before the board. The first one being as early as this March regular meeting. With that, I'll recognize Teresa Piner.
Thank you, Manager, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the board. Today, we'd like to continue some of the information that we've been providing from the last meetings, talking about the different types of models, the quasi-model, the 501c3 or 6, also looking at some of the documents that we will need to have prepared or be preparing as we move toward a Main Street designation, and hopefully that'll be in July of this year. As the manager stated in March the 6th at the regular board meeting, what we would like to do is have the town board to appoint the board of directors. Since our last meeting, we have submitted, put out applications, and we've been receiving interest from a wide variety of individuals and businesses. So I'm excited about that. We'll be bringing you that list back. Also, at the time that we select a board of directors, we would like to be looking at what tasks they need to be assigned. Some of those will involve looking at the quasi-model that we've discussed, getting that process started, memorandum of understanding, which is an agreement between two or more parties. In this case, it'd be between the town board and the Main Street Board of Directors, looking at the bylaws as well as the articles of incorporation. Some of the things that we would like to look at, and it would be the memorandum of understanding. Again, as stated earlier, we have been using drafts from looking at other communities as well as what the Main Street has in place. We would also be working with the Attorney's Office to take a look at these. This is an outline, but there are things that in there that you want to make that special and about Zebulon, and we want to make sure that we don't forget those or leave those out. MOUs are not legally binding, but they serve as a document to show that you want to have collaborative efforts, what your expectations of each other are, to kind of lay those out in the beginning. Also includes responsibilities and duties of parties based on the 4-point approach. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past, talking about the design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality, as well as we would be looking at the North Carolina Main Street Agreement. It would require a new agreement. Currently, we have one as a DAC community with the North Carolina Main Street Program. But because our designation would change, the agreement is pretty much the same, but it would just identify the town of Zebulon as a Main Street community. some of the things that we would like to do today, and not asking for decisions, but in preparing these documents and wanting to make sure that we properly reflect the town of Zebulon and where we want this organization to go. I'd like to just, ask questions, food for thought. I'll take comments and seeing how we can work through these. But some of them are things like timeframes for updates to each board. In those agreements, they require those updates, and you will want an update. And that's one of the things that I think is so special about this program. It gives responsibilities, duties, and timelines, and we have to look at that. So an annual report is a must as far as Main Street is concerned. However, we can look at doing those more frequently. There's a quarterly, a monthly, and on the flip side of that, it would be also an update to the Main Street Board on things like you've been talking about today, where projects are happening, how it's going to impact the downtown. So it would go both ways into feedback on some of the projects, just like we've talked about with water, sewer lines, roads, streets, moving, fire departments, changing. So it will have an impact on the downtown. So we want to, that needs to be reciprocal and making sure that everybody is updated on where we are. Responsibilities, again, looking at a town versus a nonprofit. Some of the things you start looking at, and you look at those public spaces, and the town has done a great job. But as we change and we have more people coming in, we see our downtown, or we see any community. It's like when you have guests to your home, you see it with different eyes. And so we want to look at that, and what is it we're going to expect for the downtown, and how do we want that to look, as well as, who wants to take those responsibilities and be assigned those duties. And with them, of course, are cost. And again, these are examples. Talking about our sidewalks, one of the things that I hear a lot about lately is the appearance of the downtown, making things, sure things are spruced up. I remember seeing pictures, and I still see some of the artwork where you have a business keeper out there sweeping the sidewalks in the morning, those types of things. But who are we going to assign keeping those areas cleaned, or who do we want to assign those duties to or those costs? Some of them are sweeping out in the morning because you care about your business. Others are more involved, such as sidewalk repair and replacement. Would you want that to be a town or a nonprofit to do that? Again, the town does a great job on that. We've talked about some of those today. But if it's something that you'd want to assign to the nonprofit, then we would have to look at where those funds are coming from. Are they coming from an MSD? Is it coming from budget? How are we assigning that? Again, general sidewalk cleaning and washing. Power washing is it's been some time, I believe, since that has taken place down there. How would we want to take care of that? How do we want to keep our sidewalks clean? And you have a little bit of a different situation. It's not just concrete with the paver, so that makes it a little bit different and more complicated. Garbage collection, again, right now, that is taken care of by the town and on a regular basis. I'm not saying to change that, but just to try to get picture in your mind of where you want this program to go and who to be responsible.
Go back.
Okay.
Let's just see if they've got any thoughts. So we're not looking for feedback. This is really more so to get your mind thinking about things to be thinking about when you consider a memorandum of understanding. Some things that will come up, though, are how frequent you expect this board to report to you. Some things will come up like whose responsibility is it to clean sidewalks in front of business, to repair sidewalks in front of business? Whose responsibility is it to provide garbage collection? So part of this presentation is to get you to be thinking about things that often come up when you become a Main Street community. But since we are together, if there's any thoughts that you've got, we're welcome to take those. So we're open for any comments you might have.
Absolutely.
My first question here is the terms of the appointed board. How long would that be?
Are typically 3 years, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's something we will address. But typically, they are staggered terms. What will be unique about this is that the board, when they select their officers, then it will be best if we can have them to agree on staggering those terms in the beginning, because you wouldn't want everybody just to be a 3-year term and then come off at the same time. You have that knowledge base. So we will be asking, and it's one of the things I'm discussing with those that call, that they may want to look at if they feel like 3 years is too much of a.
Like in walking paths. Is that also?
That is a possibility. What we would look, and part of the program is to do a downtown walk and to look at those types of things. And are there issues or barriers or concerns? And again, right now, what we would do with that and the way things are currently structured is that we would take note of that and send that to Public Works at this time, or whatever the appropriate department is when we look at, issues with parking. But that would be a walkthrough that we would take a look at all those types of things.
And then decide going forward who is going to be financially responsible for assuming those costs. In addition, it is part of what is going to happen with the Main Street program. Are we going to have some sort of appearance committee like they have in Wendell that helps with the design of murals and other such big projects, art installations or whatever, that would eventually have to come to the board for approval, but it would start out with its own committee?
And that is a possibility. It could be task assigned. A very good question. The Main Street program, a lot of times have something, again, part of that 4-point is design. So it could be that that's rolled into that, or it could be something that a separate, the way it is in Wendell right now, it's a separate public group, I believe, like a public board and citizens board that looks at that. So there are different ways that could be handled, or this town board could assign those duties to the Main Street group to look at that. Good question. And just to take a step back on that, when we're talking about sidewalks, and I just want to give a shout out to the work that's done with the Pots of Love and the volunteers that they have there. Again, that's just another example how you have another party that is being involved in taking care and looking at the downtown.
Are they going to be absorbed into part of the downtown Main Street program in some capacity? Because they are doing beautification work, and so would they be receiving monies of some sort to help with, continuation of what that project is? Or are they going to remain a sole entity that kind of does what they want and puts the planters where they want, without having to coordinate with anyone either in the town or on the board?
Well, at this time, there's no plans to change that. As this group, the Main Street group, evolves and solidifies, one of the things that I think would be good is to look out at an overall plan, an overall design plan. We can get assistance from UNCG on some of the buildings down there. We could look at uniformity in tables and trash cans, benches, that kind of thing, that I would see that coming out of the Main Street program, and then possibly a volunteer group then following those guidelines. I think it would be great for guidelines to come out of a group like this with design. Of course, that would have to be approved by the board, the town board. And then if other organizations would like to continue to participate with those guidelines, I think that would be great.
So, we could create a partnership with, say, a landscape engineer intern out of NC State or UNC, and that could be under the Main Street umbrella to create an overall design Or would that be like housed somewhere else if that was a direction?
I think either or, it depends on how detailed it gets. It'll be something that it would have to be partnered with the town, in that, because you have, if it was a project that the Main Street group took on, it still would not be unto itself. It would be something that would have to go through the different departments to be looked at. Is this practical or not? And why would this work? Why would not work? And then to elaborate on there. So and that's, again, one of the good things about this is a collaborative effort. I just don't see them independently taking on a project and running with that without the town board's input or the input from the departments.
Well, I would just, as we go through creating what we want this to look like, I think it's important that, the design aesthetic aspect come back before us, just to make sure that it kind of encompasses how we want our downtown to look and the direction that we want to go, so that it's not in the hands of a couple of people to be making overall, far-reaching decisions on, our downtown appearance.
Absolutely. No, I don't see them. I see having committees. I see having subcommittees, studying this, coming back, making recommendations, but you're correct. They would not be able to take on something of that magnitude without approval of the board and working with the departments. I totally agree.
Okay.
And I think a good one, kind of in following with that, just talking about construction infrastructure. Again, just kind of thought-provoking, the town of nonprofit. Well, in this case, in my opinion, it would be something that would be staying with the town. If no other reason, if the nonprofit had all the money, if for no other reason that because you're dealing with so many governmental entities, you would not want that Main Street program speaking for the town of Zebulon. Whether it's DOT or Duke Power, City of Raleigh Water and Sewer, the state with stormwater. Again, they would be looking at something, identifying something. You have that subcommittee looking at an issue, but this would have to come back before the town. It's not something that, even if they had the money, that I believe you would want them to take on. Some of the other things we were looking at, a cleanup day. Again, downtown, what would that look like? Would you want to see something? And again, I think of it would involve the other departments as well. But when I take a look at some of the alleys and some of the debris that has collected, and so can we come together in the Main Street group, promote a cleanup day? Whether that's, quarterly or annually, but again, it's going to have to be coordinated with town departments. But what I'm hoping is the Main Street program, being volunteer-based, is going to be able to get out there and do the legwork to help your staff, is what my desire would be. For them to come together and be able to sponsor and promote a cleanup day downtown and make it fun. It could be a fun thing. Also, to include, how far do we want to go with that? Do we want to say we're cleaning the windows downtown and the town provides the Windex that day and everybody takes care of their windows, or do we get the volunteers to come help? Again, just trying to look at what that cleanup day might look like. Trash pickup, alley pickup. And again, a lot of times it's forgotten, and typically when I speak to a property owner, they are willing to help us and take a look at that.
So as part of our participation in the Downtown Main Street program, I would have to think that these downtown business owners, their stakeholders, and that there needs to be some kind of framework where they're going to be responsible for maintaining clean windows. To the point where, like, it would be almost moot to have a day of window washing because they should be keeping up their property on a regular schedule so that, you know, we should have some standards set. Does that sound reasonable, guys?
Depends how frequently, you know, do you want to wash the windows every week or once a month? I mean, it has to be practical.
Yeah.
And then if we do an MSD, there should be funds from that that could pay for some of these things because all the property owners would pay as well as benefit as far as cleaning the sidewalk, the windows, so that they're getting something in return.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that.
Go ahead,
oh,
please.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Yes.
I think that it does make sense, but if that isn't an issue that is that an issue that we're currently facing with our downtown business owners?
I think that in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. But I think it's stated with stakeholders that we kind of set the tone of what we want the town to look like. I don't know that we have a heavy hand that we could say, you've got to wash your window, or anything legally that can make us do that. But I think, again, the direction and what is it you're wanting to see that downtown look like, and how can I plug the Main Street program into what the town is already doing to achieve those goals.
Thank you.
So with that said, will that be completely remove public works from the downtown scene for us changing trash cans, things of that nature? Will we kind of totally remove those guys?
Well, I think for today, what I was trying to do, in some of those cases, it could be. I don't necessarily see that that is going to be something that the Main Street program would totally take on. I see it as being a support role, as setting those standards, to maybe helping Public Works and Parks and Recreation with the garbage pickup, of saying, you've got your stakeholders, this is what we want to see the businesses look like downtown, and if we can do a better job of coming together as a volunteer group and keeping it clean, then I think it helps the Public Works Department, Parks and Recreation Department. I don't know that they'll be able to take those on totally and do it to the standard, then again, being volunteers, that you would want to see the town do, but I think they can help.
Thank you.
Memorandums of understanding are really about establishing expectations.
Okay.
And one thing, and I can speak from experience, particularly when you start to charge a municipal service district tax, there can be an inferred expectation that I'm paying more taxes, therefore you got to do more work for me. Okay. And so the MOU is a really good way to just codify what the expectations are of each party.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the MOU? Again, as the manager stated, it's an agreement, it's not legally binding, it's an agreement between two or more organizations that sets the expectations. One of the documents that you'll be looking at is bylaws. Again, these will be set. We have some templates that we have, but having feedback like we've had here today helps me to be able to put those items into draft form that are a priority to the town. Bylaws are established to manage internal operations, so how we're going to operate internally, the Main Street group. Examples of operational guidelines include name of the organization, the purpose of the organization, the meeting schedule, the board makeup. Again, looking at some of those things that we have coming up to you very soon. Right now, the draft is a minimum of 5 members, up 7 to 5. Do you have a preferred number of those? We wouldn't want to go below 5, but it's not a problem to go up to 7. So just, again, kind of getting feedback on where you might feel that if there's a sweet spot for the board members. I don't know if anybody has a preference. And one of the things is, we're still getting and just have received earlier, just a few minutes ago, another application. So it is gaining in interest as we're able to explain the duties and responsibilities. There are a few others that I'm waiting to hear back from. But, you know, it may be that we have enough to have 7, and it may be that and everyone has great qualifications that applied so far, so it may be something that you wanted to look at 7.
And can I also get several of those applications? I'm assuming that we have paper ones available?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great, thank you.
Question on that application process. Will they do like we do for other boards? They'll come before us and each individual kind of present themselves? Would that opportunity present itself?
I can ask them to be here. I do not know that they will all be able to be here on the 6th, but
Okay.
I'll get the information and make sure you'll have the applications and that sort of thing. But I will highly suggest that they come on the 6th.
Like that process, we could do that. Thank you.
The number of committees. A lot of times committees are either set up by the 4-point approach and those, or individual tasks. So you could have your promotion committee and your design committee, your economic vitality committee, or you could look at assigning tasks for those committees. And that could be a committee based on the task, could be an MSD committee to look at the viability of that downtown. One could be, and these are just examples, and I'll be glad to take any others you may have, looking at an incubator space or a maker space downtown or an art space downtown. All of these are something that we could assign committees based on task or based on the 4-point approach. Design committee, again, or task assigned there, we could look at a downtown streetscape plan, and we were talking about the uniformity of pots and planters and trash cans and benches, and that could be something they do now. A downtown area plan, again, being part of something like that. Okay.
So let me elaborate, because Commissioner Baxter touched on one point of this, but before I talk about her point. So a requirement of the Main Street program will be that you have different committees, one being an economic vitality committee, and they will have requirements that they have. If you would like for them to do things above and beyond what they're required, such as do an evaluation of creating a municipal service district, do an evaluation of creating an incubator space, do an evaluation of setting up a maker space, those are things that you can augment their required duties by inserting it into the bylaws. And speaking to Commissioner Baxter's comment about the murals, so as an example, that would be something that could fit under design committee. You could draw it out by paying special attention to it, saying, we want you to have a mural committee. But please know, when it comes to murals, even though we have assigned this to you above and beyond your mandatory requirements, on those issues, those are the ones you got to come back before the Board of Commissioners. So those are ways that you can augment what are required committees through your bylaws.
Absolutely. Continue with the bylaws again, telling the town story. Things have changed. It used to be that newspaper, and that's where everyone went to get the information. Now things are changing. So we'd like to see the Main Street group support those existing events that Parks and Recreation is doing a great job with, that they have already taking place. How can we support that? With volunteers on the ground? Is it through promoting, through advertising and getting the word out? Right now, it's a variety of ways with social media, the newspapers, emails, handouts, flyers. But is there something that this group can do to help with the promotions? Again, that's one of the reasons having somebody with a marketing background available to help is a tremendous asset. Supporting new events, is it something that, are there something else that's out there that you would like to look at? And this is where we're talking about cultural events. We're not talking about just another opportunity to come together, but what is it that reflects and captures the citizens of Zebulon? What is it that we can put into place that can capture the cultural heritage of the community? And again, advertising, again, another reason, we just recently had the Visit Raleigh magazine come out with information about Zebulon, and it goes out to 100,000 plus people, or individual copies are published. Also, recently, the chamber and some of the businesses got together and they did an Our State advertisement. Also, you're going through the branding and the logo process. How do you want that to look downtown? It may look a little bit different. And how do we want to carry that through? As part of the Main Street program, we'll be required to, on promotions, to carry that emblem and that logo of the Main Street community. And how do we want this to look? How do we want to tell our story? Any questions there or comments? Corporation is another one. However, this is something that is pretty much a checklist with, you go on to the Secretary of State's office. Really don't have a lot of input in this area. It is just going to be a requirement that we have to go through. What we would like to do and continue to work on is looking at March 6th, bringing those board members to you, and then moving forward, task them at that time to look at these documents that we're talking about. We'll be working with your attorney's office, making sure that we have the proper wording there, trying to capture what the town board wants to see, the direction of the Main Street program to go. And we'll be looking at these Main Street, these documents again, as well as adoption of the Main Street Agreement, which again, we already have in place as a DAC community, and I would be glad to get you a copy of that as well. We're shooting for a May 1st date so that we can then forward things to the state, gives them time, May and June, if there's something that's outstanding or they don't see that's quite the way they want it, gives us some time so they can do their paperwork in June for our designation be effective in July. Glad to take questions and comments that you have.
Questions about the slide. As the town fills out, and we have, on 38.
Okay. I have 38.
As the town fills out and we have new businesses coming in that are outside that Main Street boundary, are we going to be able to adjust the boundary and allow those businesses to become part of the program? And, you know, I mean, it sounds like to me that if you're outside of the boundary line, you're still going to benefit from the program in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And so I'd like to have an understanding of, can businesses request to become a part of that Main Street boundary? And then how are we presenting the Main Street program to businesses so that they understand that there are benefits for them to become part of the Main Street boundary and want to participate in an MSD where they might not have to if they are just one building outside of the current boundary? Like, how do we, what are our tools to be able to get them to buy into the program?
I think one of the things that you mentioned is the success of the boundary that has been established will then bring success to those that are right over that line. I will tell you that when I first looked at putting together the application, 2019, I had that blue line was real large, and because I was going to take it all in. What they want to do is they want you to more narrowly focus your attention. They think that is when you're smaller and you see success, that success breeds success, and then you can grow a program. And with the growing of that program and the success, then you can modify those boundaries. And so I think that you're right, we've got to tell our story beyond those boundaries and let the other businesses know that this is going to be a positive for them as well. I will tell you that when I'm dealing with downtown, unless it has something to do with a facade grant or whatever, I typically don't look at boundaries. I'm dealing with property owners today that are on all sides of those boundaries. And if someone's interested in coming in, and we even had a meeting yesterday for a potential business coming in outside of those boundaries. So we do not stop. I don't want you to think that we don't look beyond those boundaries. That is for Main Street's focus. I want to say that for their staff to help us on that kind of, I call it like rifling into a smaller area. But for our purposes here at the town, we never look at those boundaries and say, you're beyond that boundary and can't help you. We're excited. And I think that again, with the Main Street program, I would love to see them a business downtown, but if it's a great business, I want to see them anywhere in Zebulon, and I don't want them to leave. So you're right. I think we've got to do a better job of telling that story and how it's going to help those areas outside of that blue line.
Because if I'm understanding correctly, the service district would be within the blue line, correct?
It does not have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
Yes.
And so can we expand it if we feel like there are enough businesses that, you know, like our downtown area of exposure where people are spending the most time has increased outside where our boundary currently is? Can we increase the size of the service district, and is it a big process to do that?
The municipal service district is independent of, or can be, it doesn't have to be, of the Main Street boundary, of any of your zoning designations, just like your downtown core, your overlay district. It would be evaluated whether by the Main Street group or another entity independently. Now, it may follow after that research and that looking at, it may follow one of those boundaries, but it does not have to. I think again, it will be looked at independently of any boundary that we have downtown. It could be a totally different look.
All right, thank you so much.
So what we see right here, is this established kind of like set in stone, or this is, one thing the area that kind of like I want kind of focus on a little bit is compare food, trying to understand why they are not in there.
One of the reasons when this was established is that Compare Foods was empty. Another reason is the Main Street program and the Main Street America program are built on, one of their primary principles is preservation of historic areas. And they were originally established back in the 80s when we had urban flight. Everybody was going to the malls, and they were starting to tear down downtown historic buildings. That is where the Main Street program originated from. So that is where their heart is, that's where their fundamental principles are. It does not mean that at a later time that the boundary cannot be extended and changed, but this is the boundary with which the town of Zebulon was brought into the associate program.
So to change the boundaries, we can't do now, then you're saying, okay, if we move forward prior to July 1st, we want Compare Food in and the rest of Whitley Gallery's area put in there. That
They
can't
would
be
want
done.
to study. They would want to study and to understand why at this point in time. And I think that with the DAC program, this is what we've worked off of. They would not want to change it midstream. They would want to see the success of the Main Street program and then expand it. I don't think until we become part of that they're going to want to change that boundary midstream.
So they were referring to as who?
The North Carolina Main Street program.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions, Commissioner Harris? Commissioner Louds?
Going to the Main Street Conference next month, so we can take a lot of these questions there as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Clark, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Baxter, any questions?
I think I've asked mine. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Town Manager.
Thank you. Similarly speaking, the town of Zebulon is in position to consider or place a bond referendum on the November 2023 ballot. If they are interested in doing that, similar to the Main Street program, there are some milestones and boxes they need to check. So I'm here to recognize Finance Director Bobby Fitz to review what the dates are and what the process is associated with that. So with that, I'll recognize Bobby Fitz.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. As Joe mentioned, you've heard a little bit about at the January mini retreat. We had a bond counsel here and a financial advisor, kind of laying out a timeline of the next few months and the steps required if we were to get on a November ballot for a bond referendum. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the near future and what will need to be done in the coming months to get it just kicked off. Sometime in the next 30 to 45 days, we're going to need some determination from the board on, do they want to do this first of all, and then how much are they willing to do, and what are the purposes for the bond issuance that we're looking to do. Then, once that's done, we will prepare a resolution that will be on the May 1st board regular meeting. That will be a resolution authorizing the start of the process to apply to the local government commission to issue debt. Once that's done, then a week later we would publish a notice of intent with the LGC. I'll publish in the paper, and then what that does is triggers a 7-day period where any citizen could file a written objection to the Board of Commissioners and to the commission, local government commission.
What does that mean if they file an objection?
Well, that would, come before y'all and then the commission, and depending on the validity of their objection, it could hinder the process or it might not. It just depends on, on the board's opinion and the commission's opinion.
So how would the average citizen know that they have the opportunity to write that? I mean, we can't promote it either way, so how do they know that? Is this?
We'll publish a notice of intent. That's a requirement, like in the paper. Say, hey, you have 7 days to file a written objection to our plan to apply for issuing debt. Questions on the next couple months? All right, you heard from a financial advisor. They were at the mini retreat last month, and what they're going to do is come to the March work session, kind of lay out some guidance on how much they run some modeling and kind of lay out, okay, here's what we think you can afford to, how much debt you can afford to issue, and then they'll go over various debt instruments. Is a GO bond you want to do, like maybe certain things, it might be best to do a GO bond. Other things, you might just want to do a regular installment purchase. Installment purchases are things you can put up, like a building, for example. If you want to build a fire station with an installment purchase, you put up the building as collateral. When you do a GO bond, it's your taxing power is the collateral that you basically put up in that instance.
Are we going to be choosing which bond way we utilize depending on the bond, or it all has to, we have to decide on one type of bond or the other for everything?
It wouldn't have to.
Okay.
Let's say, well, in the nearest future, we would say the bond referendum, okay, do you want to do a certain dollar amount for this purpose? Like if we didn't want to do a bond for the fire station, for instance, we could sort of put it on the back burner more so. You wouldn't need to get the ball rolling it for the November ballot, for instance. Did I answer your question?
No.
So if you were interested in a transportation project, as an example, you can't put a road up as collateral, okay? So if you're interested in making road improvements, you got to go the bond referendum route. If you were really interested in fire stations, as an example, you have options because you can use the building as collateral. So you could go the bond referendum route, or you could go installment purchase. Okay. If you go installment purchase, you got time on your side. You can pull that trigger whenever. Bond referendum, particularly this year, you're under a time schedule.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this slide here. Okay, you know, what they'll provide is an affordability analysis. As you're aware, there's numerous projects on the board that are in the works in the coming years. For example, if we were to choose to do a bond of $10 million for transportation improvements and the fire station construction of $10 million, well, that's going to equate to about a 12.3-cent tax increase if we were to do that and try to do it all at one time, like early in the 7-year window. So what they would do is kind of lay out maybe a timeline, like, okay, we think you should do this year, and so on and so forth.
Do we assume then that it is a 6.15 cent increase per 10 million?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, and so when we actually put the bonds on the ballot, people will have the opportunity to vote on the transportation aspect or the park aspect. We're not asking them to say it's going to be an $80 million bond because we want to do everything. They're going to have the opportunity to pick and choose what makes the most sense to them. And when we do that, are we going to be, as part of our educational campaign, letting them know that for every $10 million that the town approves, that equates to 6.15 cents of an increase, so that people have a much better understanding as far as like transparency and what it's truly going to cost them as a taxpayer per project.
Yes, well, when we say 12.3, that's kind of worst case scenario if you do it all at one time. Like if you stagger it out, you could mitigate that tax increase a little bit, and then, which I'll talk about in a second, you know, we have the debt on this building paid off. That frees up some funds to where we wouldn't necessarily have to raise taxes. Let's say if we 4 or 5 years down the road, that debt's paid off, and then we wouldn't necessarily have to raise it 12 cents.
So you're saying like when we finish with the payment on this building, we would use the money that we were paying on that to go into one of these other bond repayment areas. Okay, all right.
And you know, that's not even to mention the parks projects that are on the board, and other facilities like Public Works expansion and the stadium stuff too. That, you know, that doesn't even take into that account. We're talking about $20 million for the transportation and fire and the respective tax increase that goes along with it. So in that analysis, we'll talk about, as I was kind of alluding to just then, the tax increase that might be required to pay for the debt issued, and then, like I just mentioned, paying off the debt on this building in 29, that frees up capacity for other projects. So, and that debt dwindles a little bit each year with the interest, not much, but a little bit less each year when it goes down. So that'll free up a little room, and then also growth can help pay for it. You know, we have transportation impact fees that have been collected and will be collected that'll help pay for some of these. Not a lot. It's kind of a fraction of some of these total costs on the transportation projects. And then the Parks and Recreation impact fee that's been collected about $3.3 million in just over a year, really. So that's kind of that's adding up quick. As you heard, there's some restrictions on it as far as location on where it can be spent, but that is another piece that will be factored into the affordability analysis.
So if we were to consider the traffic impact fee, and we've taken out a transportation bond for X number of dollars, we do not necessarily have to use a transportation impact fee to pay down that bond debt, we could actually say, well, we've had another like emergency traffic thing that has come up in the meantime. Are we able to then take those traffic impact fees and assign them to another project, or is it going to have to go to the payment of the bond debt?
No, well, what the plan would be to do is to take, let's say we have $1.5 million, I think, in transportation impact fees. Let's say a project's $12 million. We might just, issue $10 million debt on it. You can't pay back debt service with impact fees, but you would use it to.
Okay, that was my question, if we were going to be paying it back using the impact fees, and we will not be doing that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other piece, as far as growth helping pay for all these projects, the last few years we've had anywhere from 5 to 20% increase in the tax base, so that's a good thing. And as well as sales tax revenue, the last few years has really increased about 15 to 20%, based on allocations change with population increase, and then just healthy economy, which hopefully will continue. So those are our sales tax numbers have really grown in the last 5 or so years a lot, and hope will continue to do so. That's really all I have for today. Just kind of give you an update on what's going to happen in the next couple months, and we can take any other questions anybody has.
So during this time right now, you're kind of, each department is gathering what projects and the associated costs that they think they want to put before us to decide on if it's going, how much we're going to put in towards each area of the bond referendum. That's what's happening right now?
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Clark? You good, Max? Mr. Louds? Mr. Harrison?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Okay, the board has opportunities to consider chasing a couple of grants for the completion or the start and completion of Phase 1 of Little River Park. As with free money, it's never free. There's some requirements that the town will have to make. And so I'll recognize Sheila Long, our Parks and Recreation Director, to give you an overview of what those requirements are and when, and when we'll put that opportunity before the board for their consideration. So with that, I recognize Sheila Long.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you about Little River Park and funding opportunities that are before us. Just as a quick overview, the Play Zebulon Comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan was adopted in September of 2021. That was a huge accomplishment for this community. It is a first step of things that are required by a lot of grant agencies that Parks and Rec departments work with. You adopted the Little River Park site plan in November of 2022. That's another great step towards what's required. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, just this week when they met on Monday, they made a motion to support the development of Phase 1 of Little River Park. They also made a motion to seek Parks and Recreation Trust Fund funding or to support it, and made a recommendation that it be considered. So just as a reminder, we did present a plan that phased out the park system, and so this was the phasing was done intentionally, so we wanted early phases to be something that was tangible so that the community would be able to see their master plan at work sooner rather than later. Things that are within the river or close to it and that we're going to require a lot of permitting are going to take a little bit longer. And so we wanted to focus on things that the community could tangibly see and participate in and utilize in the early phases. We also intentionally looked at how some of the more common grant agencies score their projects and things that are likely to get funded or that would make the project more competitive. And so the components of phase one do make your project more competitive. There are going to be several things that we're going to talk about as far as next steps. And so we will go over some of them. You will see over the coming months a couple of action items for you, and some will start as early as your March meeting. So the first thing that we'll discuss is the establishment of a capital fund. And so you adopt funding that's allocated towards capital projects in your budget each year. But when you establish a capital fund, you are recognizing that this is a project that's going to take place over multiple physical years. And so you are recognizing, you're allocating, you're creating this fund that additional funds may be allocated to over a series of years, maybe grant funding may be allocated towards that, but it's keeping it in one place so it's easier to track and understand that this project is a substantial project, it's going over multiple years, and it's a much cleaner opportunity for us to understand the costs associated with it and to track it. But you don't have to reallocate funds every single year, and so it locks it in. That doesn't mean that should you decide not to move forward with the project, or you should decide not to do parts of it, or you need that funding that you can't go back and make changes. So it's just a nice, clean way for us to move forward with the project. And so you will see a request to create that capital fund for Little River Park next month. And next great step for us is to seek grant funding. And so we are going to be seeking from, or considering to seek from the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, which I'll go into more detail in the rest of this session. I'm going to briefly speak about the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is a little bit more tricky of a grant than PARTEF because LWCF is a federal grant and it comes with a lot more expectations from the community when you receive the funding. There are also some stipulations as far as applying to it that are a little bit more substantial than PARTEF. There are also, when the actual facilitation of the grant, because it's federal funding, there's a lot more on the administrative side that you have to take into consideration. Both of these have a $500,000 up to grant opportunity. They both have a 50% match. When you look just off the cuff, the biggest land-based difference in the two grants is that PARTEF requires a 25-year continued use of that park site and those amenities for public purpose in that same nature. LWCF, they're looking for forever. So that is definitely something you would want to take into consideration should you move forward in that direction. Another situation with LWCF is that there will be a grant cycle that we could apply for that will be this summer. We've worked with Recreation Resource Services, and they are state-funded consultants that are spread out across the state that help to administer PARTEF, LWCF. They also do community outreach. They help support policy building, best practices. They do a lot of training for our industry across the state. And so we have met with consultants from RRS to talk about both grants, and One of the things that stood out to us about LWCF is that we are going to have to submit to SHPO for review to determine if we're eligible to apply without meeting additional requirements. So we are preparing what that request is, and the response to our request from SHPO will go directly to Recreation Resource Services, and they will help us navigate what our next steps are. I asked our consultant if they could give us some sort of indication, looking at the site, what they thought we should expect, and they said they really couldn't tell us without hearing and seeing, because every project is different. We recognized, and he said, don't be surprised if we have to do some sort of like phase 2 archaeological digs on the entire property. We've done some closer to the dam area that FEMA required, but not on the entire property. So that is something that we are aware of, and we are going to navigate and just find out what would be required before we discount LWCF this year. But we do know it may be a challenge for us to meet the summer cycle, depending on how that SHPO review comes out. The next thing is to allocate match funding. So both of these grants, considering that they require that 50% match, they are looking, when we submit the grant, they're looking for us to say that when you are granted this, you are going to move forward. It does hurt your chances when, say you do get the grant and they come to you for the contract and you say, well, we really didn't have the money. That does not help you in the long run when you go seek for other opportunities. So for us to be able to say, yes, the match is already allocated, we're ready to go as soon as this is in place, that really helps our chance in being competitive.
And we have parks and rec impact fees, correct? Those can be used?
Yes, so we're putting forward a proposal that uses, that the majority of it, a lot of it is recreation impact fee, but also some general fund, just based on how the recreation impact fee was calculated and how it's intended to be used, so that we are fair and consistent in how we collected those fees and how we utilize them. Okay. So we talked about the eligibility. I will hit on this. So what, for many, many years, this is nothing new. The RRS consultants will say that there's limited funding and everybody can't get the $500,000. They like to spread it out. So they highly recommend that you go in at $350,000 because there are limited funds. That doesn't mean if you go in at $500,000 that you are not eligible. But in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but PARTEF has gotten more funding in the last 2 years than they've ever gotten. There's a lot of opportunity there. And another thing that I have always heard from RS is don't submit a grant and accept less than what you really need to get the project done. And so in my opinion, I think we should go after the $500,000. Is that a little bit of a risk? Possibly, but I think we have a very strong application and our consultant agrees. So that is something, if y'all have feedback that you'd like to share, I'm happy to listen if you have a concern one way or the other. We talked about there being a match required. We do have the opportunity to submit a draft to RRS, so they actually will be the ones scoring the applications, and so they will review it for us, and we can submit that review to them on March 15th, and so they'll give us some feedback, and we're able to move forward from there. A final application will be due on May 1st, and there's a summer fall announcement. I think it's important to note that PARTEF and LWCF, you do have the opportunity for them to match one another. there may be things that PARTEF would fund that LWCF wouldn't necessarily, but there are opportunities for projects to be, for them to fund one another.
What does it cost to put forth one of these applications? And if they decide that we haven't made the cut, is there an appeal process?
There's not really an appeals process. We don't have to pay to submit an application to LWCF or PARTEF. I have seen, which is why it's so important to work with your RRS consultants early on. I have seen where there may be difference of opinions in consultants on how something got done, or whether or not something meets the criteria, and they just read it very different than other people. And so I'm familiar with an organization that they lost out on their opportunity to get part of funding one year, and they, complained that they met the expectation and they provided documentation, but the process had already gone. They had to wait and apply the next year. And it's important to know that PARTEF, while it is scored by the consultants, they aren't the ones that make the decision on who is selected. The PARTEF, there's a commission that once the consultants provide a review of the different projects that have been submitted and how they ranked, at the end of the day, they kind of like go to a room where they discuss all the projects, and they kind of will move things around. Just because you score high doesn't automatically mean that you're funded, but scoring high does increase your chances of getting funded.
But the rubric is clear, so that, there's not wiggle room for opinions. If you're scored, there's, if it doesn't guarantee your funding, what are the other factors that they're looking at to make that decision?
So the scoring really just indicates that you're meeting the anticipated requirements. So me saying that having a high score helps you, it means that you have done a lot of the things that are industry standard, that are expected, and that you are proving to the state of North Carolina that you can move forward with this project. It represents something that your community is wanting. You've had community feedback, it's supported, you have funding in place, and you have the ability to not only develop it, but also maintain it, and that you've done proper environmental assessments. And so there are a lot of things there. What they recognize is that not every community is where we are, and there may be communities across the state that may not have been able to do, or may not have the funding, or they may be trying to build their first park. And there's a lot of things that they try to take into consideration there, where you may see projects move in that realm where they may not have scored well, but it's their first park and they're trying to get them moved forward. If that makes sense. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about PARTEF requirements. So it does require that there's advisory board support. It does require your comprehensive master plan. It requires your site-specific plan. It requires a statistically valid survey. All of these things you've already completed. So we've got that nailed down. The next item that we'll need to move forward is having the elected board's support in proceeding with this grant application. We also have to conduct community engagement. We have scheduled a public meeting on March 7th from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Creative Cup. So this is an opportunity for us to just share about the project, to answer questions, and we can also talk about the PARTEF funding opportunity for those that want to engage in that conversation. We also have to do civic group presentations. We're currently in progress of doing that. So there's, certain requirements when we go to the civic groups and things that we have to accomplish. And so we're excited to be able to talk with community members. If there is somebody in particular that you want us to talk with, we've already, at minimum, we have to do 2. We've already scheduled 3 presentations, and we're looking to do those in the month of March, any ones that we've not already done.
What's the 3 organizations that you have?
The Boys and Girls Club, the Rotary Club, and Zebulon Downtown Arts Council. So we tried to focus on ones that we might not have gone directly to during the master planning process, so that we could get additional feedback.
All right, thank you.
An additional requirement is to adopt a parks capital improvement plan. And so that is the spreadsheet, that is the spreadsheet that you've been provided with, and it shows expenditures. And before you look at it and go, oh my, there's no way we can fund all of this, I think it's really important to know what it's not. It's not allocating funding. The only time you're allocating funding is when you do the budget process or you do some sort of budget amendment. And so having this capital improvement plan recognizes all of the projects that were based on your master plan. And it recognizes what the cost would be. The second page that you were provided recognizes what the revenue would likely have to be. Now, we recognize that's a lot of revenue and that's a lot of expenses that we're likely not to get all of that. So what you do is every year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wasn't quite sure where that came from.
I clearly wasn't.
Excuse me. So what you do is you reevaluate this annually, and you prioritize based on available revenue and based on priorities. So priorities may change. I talked with the advisory board about this at their meeting on Monday, and the example I gave was a Gill Street Park. So off the top of my head, Gill Street Park, I think, is slated for like 2027. It was like a year 7 project for the replacement of the playground. In looking at how it's being utilized, some of the issues we've had with that playground in the last year, I would not recommend that you wait until 2027. That needs to be moved up, and it needs to be, you need to build something that's more appropriate for the location, something that's not the traditional deck and slide, something that's really gonna engage the park users a little bit more. And so that is something each year we have conversation about, and we will update from year to year based on new priorities, based on revenue. So I think it's important that you list all of those projects, because you never know when a grant opportunity is coming forward or when something new is a priority for the community, and having it in a plan is helpful for when you go to PARTEF. You can say, yes, this has been a priority for us, and you can move forward.
When you are looking at, pardon me, the Gill Street Park, and under the playground replacement, it says FY 2027, FY 2028. Is that $50,000 under FY 27 supposed to be on the next line where the paved walking path should be?
It is. Thank you. I have an issue with my Excel where it highlights the row below it. So thank you for recognizing that.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any kind of additional monies that were.
No. And I'll have that updated before it's brought to you for a vote.
Okay.
Yeah. If you see anything else like that, feel free to let me know. Okay. Any questions on what a capital improvement plan is and why we want to bring it forward to you?
No, and I'm just assuming that this, much like, our UDO and a lot of the other plans, there's going to be some wiggle room, correct?
Yeah, you honestly, like, this is something we look at annually and have a discussion about, do we need to move things as something into a priority? And if you don't, like, if you look at the revenue, and this is something the master plan recognized, to do all of these projects, you are gonna have to have a substantial bond. If a bond doesn't move forward, then priorities get shifted. And, you know, some projects get moved to an out year. We will bring this forward for you to consider adoption at your March meeting. So this is something that we're required to submit with our application. So for upcoming board considerations, you'll have the opportunity to adopt the Little River Park Capital Fund in March, to allocate matching funds at your March meeting. And I'm not sure if I missed that in discussing that more in the presentation, but I'll hit it on now. So we were looking at, we already utilized some recreation impact fees for the design piece. They're already allocated. And so we were looking at $250,000 of recreation impact fees to match and $250,000 of general fund to be the match. So that is the request that will be coming forward. There's also going to be at your March meeting the adoption of the park capital improvement plan. And then in April, we will be bringing the grant application for you to consider approval for us to officially apply. Are there any comments or questions?
Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Baxter? Any questions? Commissioner Hobbs? All right. Thank you. Before we go to closed session, we can take a 10-minute recess.
10 minutes. Says, don't leave by 6. My 10 minutes. Tablet in my car. No, I don't feel big. I don't closed session. I can get it.
Shannon, do you have just a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Girl.
So, your comments for rec desk, I didn't want you to think that the conversation we had,
We're moving along pretty good.
deaf ears. So this week, we've started to roll out changes in the registration.
You've done a good job.
So we're continuing, we've got to go back.
Maybe it was, I was thinking it was next week already. No, you're right. I am so confused on where I am.